The DDO call out of allumage,
yes,
which is ignition.
You'll see the flame under the main engine, Vulcan. So we shall ignite the engine and check it for 7 seconds.
That's the main engine.
That's the main engine. And when everything's fine and with the check is okay, then the ignition of the boosters and the actual liftoff.
Okay, so you get main engine lights up first, computers check out for 7 seconds, all the pressure, testing it on the ground, and then the boosters go. We'll let the DDO call out the final countdown and be back after Ariane has cleared the tower.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, unité. Top, allumage Vulcain. Confirmé. Top, allumage EAP, décollage. Les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
Beautiful. There, Ariane off on her way with just a 24-hour delay, leaving a trail of gold as she rises into the sky over French Guiana at 18:51 local time and right on time. Ariane began her mission.
And right on time. So we had a mass at liftoff of 773 tons, including 554 tons for the sole boosters. The boosters, which give a very strong initial acceleration that will increase velocity from 0 to 7,200 kilometers per hour in about 2.3 minutes. That's 4,500 miles per hour. So after booster separation, which will occur in about 2 minutes, the launcher will have lost about 75% of its liftoff mass. The boosters will fall down into the Atlantic Ocean in a zone which has been secured by an international advice to maritime navigation.
Ariane burning now 5 tons of fuel per second. That's 2.5 tons in each booster per second. The EPC, also the core stage, as it's called, is burning another 300 kilos of fuel per second. All that adds up to roughly the equivalent of a dozen Airbuses. She's now following the program in the onboard computer, which gives all the orders, including stage separations, which we will soon see. 4 powered flight phases tonight. We're in the first one, the main engine and the boosters. And the boosters, as Alex said, they're going to burn for another maybe 20 seconds. Alex, take a look on the left, the upper left screen. Can you give us a description of the curve, please?
Yeah, we see the simulated flight trajectory, which is computed by using very accurate mathematical models of the launcher and the ATV, and by application, of course, of the Keplerian laws for the ballistic phase.
Which we're going to hear about a little later.
Yeah, a little later.
All 3 of them.
So the Mach, which follows...
DDO has just called out the separation of the boosters. You can see what that looks like. There's another one at a camera range on the left, but they fall back down right on time at about 64 kilometers up, I think. They fall away from the shore. People streaming back in from the terraces, you can see in the background there.
Yes, now to follow the actual flight. And now we're expecting the fairing separation.
That's the next milestone. Minutes. You can see the cursor crawling up on the upper left. I don't know if you can read it. SEPQUAF, it says separation of the fairing. On the lower left, Alex, can you describe what the bottom lines are?
Yes, we have the real-time information from the launcher of the velocity and the altitude, and also the angle of the telemetry antenna with respect to horizontal.
So you see the altitude. The altitude is 102 kilometers. That's the second line. So we're above the atmosphere, which is where we can separate the fairing, and the DDO will call out that milestone in a moment. We are in the second.
Largage de la coiffe.
There it is. Largage.
There it is. So we don't need the protection of the fairing anymore. We have crossed the atmospheric layers, and then now we don't need this 2 tons weight anymore.
They're actually 2 halves. 1 half, like one of the boosters before, was out of.
Yeah, it's cut vertically and horizontally.
Everything is perfect on board, says the DDO. The ATV now under the fairing, exposed to the elements. And we're going to go now to the next part of the broadcast, which is the latest news from Arianespace, and there is a lot of it. So take a look. Ariane ended 2010 in style with its sixth successful launch on December 29th, delivering 2 telecommunication satellites, Hispasat-1E for Spain and KoreaSat-6 for South Korea. It was the 41st straight successful mission for the European launch vehicle. 2010 was a big year for Arianespace, with 12 contracts signed for Ariane and 7 for Soyuz. In all, 6 successful launches for a total of 12 satellites. 2011 promises to be as big, with Soyuz and Vega bringing their launch services to the space base. Tokyo, January 19th. During the EJBRT roundtable of Japanese and European industrialists, Jean-Yves Le Gall met with Japan's Prime Minister, Naoto Kan. The meeting underscored strengthening cooperation between Europe and Japan in matters of space research and in commercial space. Eutelsat has signed with Arianespace to launch one of its new satellites in 2012. This is the 26th contract between the two partners. Jean-Yves Le Gall and Dr. Volker Liebig of the European Space Agency also signed for launch of Sentinel-1A, an environmental monitoring satellite, for December of next year. Baikonur, January 28th. The Soyuz once again successfully lifted off from the Kazakhstan base. It was launch number 1766 of the legendary vehicle. Meanwhile, here in French Guiana, Soyuz is preparing for her maiden voyage, set for the second half of this year. Work on the launch pad is nearly complete. Vega 2 is set for her first flight. Qualification tests continue here in French Guiana.
We're now in the stage of combined tests to be completed by the end of June. The mechanical tests are completed, the launcher module is now integrated into the Vega gantry, the electric tests are completed up to 50%. Now remain the fluid tests with the filling of the Avon, the fourth stage of Vega with its own propellants. Very delicate phase which will take place under the responsibility of Arianespace in French Guiana. During those next few months, the launch system review should also take place. The steering committee is planned for the end of June. The dates of the qualification flight campaign will then be known. It's planned for the early summer. The docking with the first Vega flight is planned for the autumn of this year. So let's keep our fingers crossed and good luck, Vega.
Ciao.
We are in the second of the powered flight phases. The main engine burning alone, it'll burn for between 8 and 9 minutes.
It will have burnt about 149 tons of liquid oxygen and 25 tons of hydrogen. And then let's learn more about the trajectory by Alexis Macaire.
Tonight's flight is using an Ariane 5 ES version. Storable propellant aboard the upper stage will allow it to reignite several times, something essential for placing ATV-2 into its final orbit.
Unlike the other standard GTO flights carried out with an A5 ECA launcher with only one ignition of the upper stage, here with the ATV there will be 2 ignitions of the upper stage separated by a 45-minute-long ballistic phase. The first EPS boost will last 10 minutes. It is carried out above the Atlantic Ocean within reach of the Santa Maria station in the Azores. At the end of this EPS-1 boost, the launcher is already in a stable orbit with a perigee at 140 kilometers and an apogee at 260. This flight will go on above Europe, then Asia, until Australia. The EPS is ignited again. The EPS-2 boost will last 30 seconds and it will then reach the orbit targeted for this mission, 260 kilometer circular altitude. After the EPS-2 boost, the composite enters a stabilization phase.
This stabilization phase will let the ATV control center in Toulouse make contact with the ATV-2. Then separation can occur. On its own, the ATV will circle the Earth for a week before catching up with the space station 22,000 kilometers ahead of it. It'll then have reached an altitude of 350 kilometers and be ready to dock. You heard Alexei in the film talking about the Santa Maria ground station. That's an ESA tracking station, rather new one, joined the system in 2008. Not used a lot, but it was used for ESA's Envisat, which was launched by Ariane in 2002, Flight 145, and it's going to be used also to receive launcher telemetry for the upcoming Galileo GPS launches on Ariane or Soyuz from the space station. The DDO has just called out the extinction of the lower stage and the separation of the lower